Sweet Sorrows, Invented Life. It began as a dollhouse, a miniature habitat carefully constructed from wood and glue and paint, meticulously crafted to recreate a full-sized dwelling in the most exquisite level of detail. When it was built, it was gifted and played with by children, illustrating daily happenings in simplified exaggerations. There are dolls, a family with a mother and father and son and daughter and small dog. They were delicate cloth replicas of suits and dresses. The dog has real fur. There is a kitchen and a parlor and a sunroom, bedrooms and stairs and an attic. Each room is filled with furniture and decorated with miniature paintings and minuscule vases of flowers. The wallpaper is printed with intricate patterns. The tiny books can be removed from the shelves. It has a roof with wood and shingles, each no bigger than a fingernail. Diminutive doors that close and latch. The house opens with a lock and key and expands, though most often it is kept closed. The doll life inside visible only through the windows. The dollhouse sits in a room in this harbor on the Starless Sea. The history of it is missing. The children who once played with it long grown and gone. The tale of how it came to be placed in an obscure room in an obscure place is forgotten. It is not remarkable. What is remarkable is what has evolved around it. What is a single house, after all, with nothing surrounding it? Without a yard for the dog, without a complaining neighbor across the street, without a street to have neighbors on at all, without trees and horses and stores, without a harbor, a boat, a city across the sea. All this has to be built up around it. One child's invented world has become another's, and so on, until it is everyone's world, embellished and expanded with metal and paper and glue, gears and found objects and clay. More houses have been constructed. More dolls have been added. Stacks of books arranged by color serve as landscape. Folded paper birds fly overhead. Hot air balloons descend from above. There are mountains and villages and cities, castles and dragons and floating ballrooms, farms with barns and fluffy cotton sheep. A working clock of a reincarnated watch keeps time atop a tower. There is a park with lake and ducks, a beach with a lighthouse. The world cascades around the room. There are paths for visitors to walk on to access the corners. There is an outline of what was once a desk beneath the buildings. There are shelves on the walls that are now distant countries across an ocean with carefully rippled blue paper waves. It began as a dollhouse. Over time it has become more than that. A doll town, a doll world, a doll universe, constantly expanding. Almost everyone who finds the room feels compelled to add to it, to leave the contents of their pockets repurposed as a wall or tree or a temple. A thimble becomes a trash can. Used matchsticks create a fence. Loose buttons transform into wheels or apples or stars. They add houses made from broken books or rainstorms conjured from glass glitter. They move a figure or a landmark. They escort the tiny sheep from one pasture to another. They reorientate the mountains. Some visitors play in the room for hours, creating stories and narratives. Others look around, adjust a crooked tree or door, and depart. Or they simply move the ducks around the lake and are satisfied with that. Anyone who enters the room affects it, leaves an impression upon it, even if it's unintentional. Quietly opening the door lets a soft draft rustle over the objects inside. A tree might topple. A doll might lose its hat. An entire building might crumble. An ill-placed step might crush the hardware store. A sleeve could catch on the top of a castle, sending a princess tumbling to the ground below. It is a fragile place. Any damage is usually temporary. Someone will come along and provide repairs. Restore a fallen princess to her battlement. Rebuild the hardware store with sticks and cardboard. Create new stories upon the old ones. The original house in the center changes in subtler ways. The furniture moves from room to room. The walls are painted or papered over. The mother and father dolls spend time separately in other structures with other dolls. The daughter and son leave and return and leave again. The dog chases cars and sheep and dares to bark at the dragon. Around them, the world grows even larger. It sometimes takes the dolls quite a while to adapt. Zachary Ezra Rawlings sits on the floor of his closet with the door closed. Surrounded by a forest of hanging shirts and coats, his back up against where the door to Narnia would be if his closet were a wardrobe, having something of an existential crisis. He has read Sweet Sorrows in its entirety, and read it again, and thought perhaps he should not read it a third time, but read it a third time anyway, because he could not sleep. He still cannot sleep. Now it is 3 a.m., and Zachary is in the back of his closet, a version of his favorite reading spot when he was a child. A comfort he has not returned to in years, and never in this closet, which is ill-suited for such sitting. He sat in his childhood closet after he found the door. He remembers that now. It was a better closet for sitting, a deeper one, with pillows he had dragged in to make it more comfortable. That one didn't have a door to Narnia either. He knows because he checked. Only the singular section of Sweet Sorrows is about him, though there are pages missing. The text comes back to the pirate and the girl again, but the rest is disjointed. It feels incomplete. Much of it revolves around an underground library. Not a library, a book-centric fantasia that Zachary missed his invitation to because he didn't open a painted door when he was 11. Apparently, he went around looking for the wrong imaginary entryways. The wine-colored book rests at the foot of the bed. Zachary will not admit to himself that he is hiding from it in the closet where it cannot see him. A whole book, and he has no idea, even after reading it 3 times, how he should proceed. The rest of the book doesn't feel as tangible as those few pages near the beginning. Zachary has always had a complicated view of magic because of his mother, but while he can grasp herbalism and divination, the things in the book are very much beyond his definition of real magic. But if those few pages about him are real, the rest could be. Zachary puts his head between his knees and tries to keep his breathing steady. He keeps wondering who wrote it, who saw him in that alleyway with the door, and why they wrote it down. The opening pages imply that the first stories are nested. The pirate telling the story about the acolyte seeing the story about the boy, him. But if he's in a story, within a story, who is telling it? Someone must have typeset it and bound it in a book. Someone somewhere knows the story. He wonders if someone somewhere knows he's sitting on the floor of his closet. Zachary crawls out into his room, his legs stiff. It is near dawn. The light outside his window, a lighter shade of dark. He decides to take a walk. He leaves the book on the bed. His fingers start twitching immediately, wanting to take it with him so he can read it again. He wraps a scarf around his neck. Reading a book four times in one day is perfectly normal behavior. He buttons his wool coat. Having a physical response to a lack of a book is not unusual. He tugs his knit hat down over his ears. Everyone spends nights on the floor of their closet during grad school. He pulls on his boots. Finding an incident from your childhood in an authorless mystery book is an everyday occurrence. He slips his hands into his gloves. Happens to everyone. He puts the book in his pocket of his coat. Zachary trudges through the newly fallen snow without a destination in mind. He passes the library and continues toward a hilly stretch of campus near the undergraduate dorms. He could adjust his route to pass his old dorm, but he does not. He always finds it strange to look at a window he used to look out of from the other side. He works his way through the crisp and unbroken snow, crushing the pristine surface under his boots. He usually enjoys the winter and the snow and the cold, even when he can't feel his toes. There's a wonder to it, left over from reading about snow in books before he got to experience it for himself. His first snow was a laughter-filled night spent in a field outside of his mother's farmhouse, making snowballs with his bare hands and constantly losing his footing in shoes he discovered after the fact were not waterproof. Inside their cashmere-lined gloves, his hands tingle thinking about it. He is always surprised how quiet the snow is, until it melts. Rollins! A voice calls from behind him, and Zachary turns. A bundled figure with a striped hat waves a brightly mittened hand at him, and he watches the mismatched color move over a field of white as it trudges up the hill through the snow, sometimes hopping in the footholds that he has left. When the figure is just yards away, he recognizes Kat, one of the few undergrads from his department who has moved from acquaintance to almost friend, mostly because she took it upon herself to get to know everyone, and he has been Kat approved. She runs a video game-themed cooking blog and tends to try out her often delicious experiments on the rest of them. Skyrim-inspired sweet rolls and classic Bioshock cream-filled cakes and maraschino truffles, odes to the Pac-Man cherries. Zachary suspects she does not sleep, and she has a tendency to appear out of thin air to suggest cocktails or dancing or some other excuse to coerce him out of his room. And while Zachary has never articulated the fact that he is grateful to have someone like her in his otherwise highly introverted lifestyle, he is pretty sure she already knows. "Hey, Kat," Zachary says when she reaches him, hoping he won't appear as off-kilter as he feels. "What brings you out so early?" Kat sighs and rolls her eyes. The sigh drifts away as a cloud in the frigid air. "God-awful early is the only hour I can get lab time for as of yet unofficial projects. How about you?" Kat shifts her bag on her shoulder and nearly loses her balance. Zachary puts a hand out to steady her, but she recovers on her own. "Couldn't sleep," Zachary answers, which is true enough. "Are you still working on that scent-based project?" "I am!" Kat's cheeks betray the smile hidden by her scarf. "I think it's the key to immersive experience. Virtual reality isn't all that real if it doesn't smell like anything. I can't figure out how to get it to work for an in-home use yet, but my site-specific stuff is going well. I'm probably going to need beta testers in the spring if you'd be willing." If spring ever shows up, I'm game. Kat's projects are legendary throughout the department. Elaborative, interactive installments, and always memorable regardless of how successful she deems them. They make Zachary's work feel overly cerebral and sedentary by comparison, especially since so much of his own work is analyzing work already done by others. "Excellent," Kat says. "I'll put you on my list. And I'm glad I ran into you. Are you busy tonight?" "Not really," Zachary says, having not thought about the fact that the day would go on, that campus would continue in its routines, and he is the only one who has had his universe turned askew. "Could you help me run my J-term class?" Kat asks. 7 to 8:30 or so. "Your Harry Potter knitting class? I'm not a very good knitter." "No, that's on Tuesdays. This one is a salon-style discussion called Innovation in Storytelling, and this week's topic is gaming. I'm trying to have a guest co-moderator for each class. And Noriko was supposed to do this one, but she bailed on me to go skiing. It'll be super chill, no lecturing or anything you need to prepare, just babbling about gaming in a relaxed yet intellectual setting. I know that's your jam, Rawlings. Please." The impulse to say no that Zachary has had for pretty much anything that involves talking to people arises automatically. But as Kat bounces on her heels to keep warm, he considers the proposal. It sounds like a good way to get out of his head and away from the book for a little while. This is what Kat does, after all. It's good to have a cat. "Sure, why not?" he says. Kat whoops. The whoop echoes over the snow-covered lawn, prompting a pair of disgruntled crows to abandon their perch in a nearby tree. "You're awesome," Kat says. "I'll knit you a Ravenclaw scarf as a thank you." "How did you know?" "Please, you're so obviously Ravenclaw. See you tonight. We meet in the lounge at Scott Hall, the one in the back on the right. I'll text you details when my hands thaw. You're the best. I'd hug you, but I think I'd fall down." Sentiment appreciated, Zachary assures her, and he considers, here in the snow, asking if Kat has ever heard of something called the Starless Sea, because if anyone would have heard of a possibly fairy tale, possibly mythical location, it would be Kat. but articulating it aloud would make it too real, and instead he watches as she trudges off towards the science quad where the emerging media center is housed, though he realizes she might very well be headed to the chemistry labs instead. Zachary stands alone in the snow, overlooking the slowly waking campus. Yesterday, it felt like it always does, like almost not quite home. Today, he feels like an imposter. He breathes in deeply, the pine-scented air filling his lungs. 2 black dots near the pale blue of the cloudless sky. 2 black dots mar the pale blue of the cloudless sky, the crows that took flight moments ago, in the process of disappearing into the distance. Zachary Ezra Rawlings commences the long walk back to his room. Once he has kicked off his boots and peeled off his winter layers, Zachary takes out the book. He turns it over in his hands and then puts it down on his desk. It doesn't look like anything special, like it contains an entire world. Though the same could be said of any book. Zachary pulls his curtains shut and is half asleep before they settle over the window, blocking out the sun-brightened snowscape and the figure watching him from across the street in the shadow of an unruly spruce. Zachary wakes hours later when his phone chirps a text alert at him, the vibration rattling it enough that it falls off the desk and onto the floor, landing softly on a discarded sock. 7 p.m. Scott Hall, first floor lounge. From the front entrance, go past the stairs and turn right down the hall. It's behind the French doors and looks like the post-apocalyptic version of a room where fancy ladies have tea. I'll be there early. You're the best. Love, Kay. The clock on the phone informs him that it is already 5:50 and Scott Hall is clear across campus. Zachary yawns and drags himself out of bed and down the hall to take a shower. Standing in the steam, he thinks he daydreamed the book, but the relief that this thought brings slowly dissipates and he remembers the truth. He scrubs his skin near raw with homemade almond oil and sugar mixture that his mother gives him every winter. This year's batch is scented with Velveteer to promote emotional calm. Maybe he can scrub off that boy standing in the alleyway. Maybe the real Zachary is under there somewhere. Every 7 years, each cell in your body has changed, he reminds himself. He is not that boy anymore. He is twice removed from that boy. Zachary spends so long in the shower that he has to rush to get ready, grabbing a protein bar when he realizes he hasn't eaten all day. He tosses a notebook in his satchel, and his hands hover over Sweet Sorrows before grabbing the little stranger instead. He is halfway out the door when he doubles back to put Sweet Sorrows in his bag as well. As he walks towards Scott Hall, his damp hair freezes in curls that brush crunchily against his neck. The snow is crisscrossed with so many boot tracks that there is hardly an untouched patch on campus. Zachary passes a lopsided snowman wearing a real red scarf. A line of busts of former college presidents is mostly obscured in snow, stray marble eyes and ears peeking up from beneath the flakes. Kat's directions prove helpful once he arrives at Scott Hall, one of the residences he's never been in before. He passes the stairs and a small empty study room before finding the hallway and following it for some time until he reaches a half-open pair of French doors. He's not sure he has the right room. A girl sits knitting in an armchair while a couple of other students rearrange some of the post-apocalyptic-looking tea party furniture, velvet chairs and settees worn thin when wounded by time, a few repaired with duct tape. "Yay, you found us!" Kat's voice came from behind him, and he turns to find her holding a tray with a teapot and several stacked teacups. She looks smaller with her coat and striped hat removed, her buzzed short hair a fuzzy shadow covering her face. "I didn't realize you were so serious about the tea," Zachary says, helping her move the tray to a coffee table in the middle of the room. "I don't just about tea. I have Earl Grey and peppermint and some sort of immunity-boosting thing with ginger, and I made cookies." By the time the tea and the multiple trays of cookies are arranged, the class is filtered in. About a dozen students, though it feels like more with all the coats and scarves flung over the back of chairs and couches. Zachary settles into an ancient armchair by the window that Kat directs him to with a cup of Earl Grey and an oversized chocolate chip cookie. Hi everyone, Kat says, pulling the attention in the room away from the baked goods and the chatter. Thanks for coming. I think we have some newbies who missed last week. So how about we do quick intros around the room, starting with our guest moderator. Kat turns and looks at Zachary expectantly. Okay, I'm Zachary. He manages between chews before swallowing the rest of his cookie. I'm a second-year emerging media grad student and mostly study video game designs with a focus on psychology and gender issues. And I found the book in the library yesterday that someone wrote my childhood into. How's that for innovative storytelling? He thinks, but does not say aloud. The introductions continue and Zachary retains identifying details and areas of interest better than names. Several are theater majors, including a girl with an impressive multicolored dreadlocks and a blond boy with his feet propped up on a guitar case. The girl with cat-eye glasses, who looks vaguely familiar, is an English major, as is the girl who continues to knit, but barely glances down at her work. The rest are mostly emerging media undergrads. Some of them he recognizes. The guy in the blue hoodie, the girl with the tattooed vines peeking out of the cuffs of her sweater, the ponytail guy. But no one he knows as well as Kat. And I'm Kat Hawkins, senior emerging media and theater double major. And I mostly spend my time trying to turn games into theater and theater into games. And also baking. Tonight we're going to discuss video games specifically. I know we have a lot of gamers here, but if you're not, please ask if you need terminology clarification or anything like that. How are we defining gamer? The guy in the blue hoodie asks with enough of an edge in his voice that Kat's bright expression darkens almost imperceptibly. I follow Gertrude Stein definition. A gamer, Zachary jumps in, adjusting his glasses and hating himself for the pretentiousness, but hating the guy who needs to define everything a little bit more. As far as how we're defining game in this context, Kat continues, let's keep along the lines of narrative games, role-playing games, aka RPGs, etc. Everything should come back to story. Kat prompts Zachary into sharing some of his standard primers on game narrative, character agency choices and consequences, points he's made in so many papers and projects that it's a pleasant change to relate them to a group that hasn't heard all of these 1,000 times before. Kat jumps in here and there, and it doesn't take long for the discussion to take off organically. Questions becoming debates and points volleying between sips of tea and cookie crumbs. The conversation veers into immersive theater, which was last week's topic, and then back to video games. From the collaborative nature of massive multiplayer back to single-player narratives, and virtual reality with a brief stopover on tabletop games. Eventually, the question of why a player plays a story-based game and what makes it compelling comes up to be examined and dismantled. Isn't that what everyone wants, though? The girl with the cat-eye glasses asks in response. To be able to make your own choices and decisions, but to have it be part of a story? You want that narrative there to trust in, even if you want to maintain your own free will. You want to decide where to go and what to do, and which door to open. You still want to win the game, Ponytail Guy adds. Even if winning the game is just ending the story. Especially if a game allows for multiple possible endings, Zachary says, touching on the subject of a paper he'd written 2 years previously. Wanting to co-write the story, not dictate it yourself, so it's collaborative. It'll work in games better than anything, one of the emerging media muses. And maybe avant-garde theater, he adds when one of the theater majors starts to object. Choose your own adventure digital novels, the knitting English major throws out. No, commit to being a full-blown game if you're going to go through all the decision-making option trees. All the if-thens, and the girl with the vine tattoos argues, talking with her hands so the vines help emphasize her points. Proper text stories are pre-existing narratives to fall into. Games unfold as you go. If I get to choose what's going to happen in a story, I want to be a mage, or at least have a fancy gun. We're veering off topic, Kat says. Sort of. What makes a story compelling? Any story, in basic terms. Change. Mystery. High stakes. Character growth. Romance, the guy in the blue hoodie chimes in. What? It's true. He adds when several eyebrows raised in his direction. Sexual tension, is that better? Also true. Obstacles to overcome. Surprises. Meaning. But who decides what the meaning is? Zachary wonders aloud. The reader, the player, the audience. That's what you bring to it, even if you don't make the choices along the way. You decide what it means to you. The knitting girl pauses to catch a slipped stitch, and then continues. A game or a book has meaning to me, might be boring to you, or vice versa. Stories are personal, you relate or you don't. Like I said, everyone wants to be a part of a story. Everyone is part of a story. What they want is to be part of something worth reading, worth recording. It's that fear of mortality. I was here, and I mattered mindset. Zachary's thoughts begin to wander. He feels old, not certain if he was ever so enthusiastic as an underclassman, and wondering if he seemed as young to the grad students then as this group seems to him now. He thinks back to the book in his bag, turning over ideas about what it is to be in a story, wondering why he has spent so much of his time propelling narratives forward and trying to figure out how to do the same with this one. Isn't it easier to have words on a page and leave everything up to the imagination? Another one of the English major asks, a girl in a fuzzy red sweater. The words on the page are never easy, the girl in the cat-eyed glasses points out, and several people nod. Simpler then, red sweater girl holds up a pen. I can create a whole world with this. It may not be innovative, but it's effective. It is until you run out of ink, someone retorts. Someone else points out that it's 9 already, and more than one person jumps up, apologizes, and rushes off. The rest of them continue to chat in fractured groups and pairs, and a couple emerging media students hover over Zachary, inquiring about class recommendations and professors as they put the room more or less back in order. That was so great, thank you, Kat says when she's gotten his attention again. I owe you one, and I'm going to get started on your scarf this weekend. I promise you'll have it while it's still cold enough to wear it. You don't have to, but thanks, Kat. I had a good time. Me too. And oh, Elaine is waiting in the hall. She wanted to catch you before you left, but didn't want to interrupt while you were talking to people. Oh, okay, Zachary says, trying to remember which one was Elena. Kat gives him another hug and whispers in his ear. She's not trying to pick you up. I forewarned her that you are orientationally unavailable. Thanks, Kat, Zachary says, trying not to roll his eyes, and knowing he should probably use that exact phrase instead of simply saying that he's gay, because Kat hates labels. Elena turns out to be the one in the cat-eyed glasses, leaning against the wall and reading a Raymond Chandler novel Zachary can now identify as The Long Goodbye, and he realizes why she looks familiar. He probably would have placed her if her hair would have been in a bun. Hey, Zachary says, and she looks up from her book with a dazed expression he's used to wearing himself, the disorientation of being pulled out of one world and back into another. Hi, Elena says, coming out of her fiction fog and tucking the Chandler in her bag. I don't know if you remember me from the library yesterday. You checked out that weird book that wouldn't scan. I remember, Zachary says. I haven't read it yet, he adds, not sure why the lie is necessary. Well, after you left, I got curious, Elena says. The library is awfully quiet, and I've been on a mystery kick, so I decided to do some investigating. Really? Zachary asked, suddenly interested, before he had been lying in nervous apprehension. Did you find anything? Not a lot. The system's so barcode happy that if the computer doesn't recognize it, it's hard to dig up a file. But I remembered that book looked kind of old, so I went down to the card archives. back from when everything was stored in those fabulous wooden catalogs, to see if it was there, and it wasn't, but I did manage to decipher how it was coded. There's a couple of digits in the barcode that indicate when it was added to the system, so I cross-referenced those. That's some impressive librarian detective work. Ha, thank you. Unfortunately, the only thing it turned up was that it was part of a private collection. Some guy died, and a foundation distributed his library to a bunch of different schools. I updated the files and wrote down the name, so if you want to find any of the other books, someone should be able to print out a list for you. I'm working most mornings until classes start up again if you're interested. Elena digs around her bag and pulls out a folded scrap of lined notebook paper. Some of them should be in the rare book room and not in circulation, but whatever. I gave it a catalog entry, so it should scan fine whenever you return it. Thanks, Zachary says, as he takes the paper from her. Item required, a voice in his head remarks. I'd like that. I'll stop by sometime soon. Cool, Elena says, and thanks for coming tonight. That was a great discussion. See you around. She's gone before he can say goodbye. Zachary unfolds the paper. There are 2 lines of text, written in remarkably neat handwriting. From the private collection of J.S. Keating, donated in 1993, a gift from the Keating Foundation.